Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to our call today with Ed Newton, CPA, CFP, and President of Newton Financial Network. On today's call, Ed is going to discuss the question, is your pension underfunded, and the three consequences if it is. If you're not already a client of Ed's, he's originally from Huntington, West Virginia, has a degree in accounting from Virginia Tech, and a master's degree from Liberty University. Ed landed at Arthur Anderson & Company in their tax department and then began his CPA firm in 1977. Ed's a CPA and a certified financial planner and is uniquely positioned to help clients achieve and sustain a worry-free retirement. And if you do know him, you know Ed has also been a commercial pilot for a major airline since 1982, and his current weekend routes are to London, England, and Frankfurt, Germany. Ed, good morning and welcome to the call.
Well, good morning, Jeff, and I apologize to all of you for being a few minutes late, but quite honestly, I was working with a client trying to ensure that he does have a retirement plan in place. So I do apologize for that. I try to be very punctual on these calls, and we'll certainly do so going in the future. That being said, I'd like to speak just a little bit today about the underfunding problems and issues with that we're running in this country now, and how it could affect you, and an idea or two of what you might be able to do to help get past that. So, Jeff, if we could go ahead and move to the next slide there. First of all, I want to just explain, I suppose, what an underfunded pension is. I mean, it may be self-explanatory to you, but basically, if the pension liabilities, in other words, the present value of what the company needs to pay you in retirement is the liabilities. The assets, of course, are the dollars that they've put in there. So when there's not enough money in there to pay all of the retirees and even folks that are still working but have retirement benefits accrued to them, then that's when the pension is considered underfunded. Wilshire Consulting, a consulting company that gather statistics on a lot of this data, reported that the funding ratio dropped from 79.7% in 2011 down to 78.1% in 2012. That doesn't sound like a big drop, and it's not necessarily that big of a drop, but the problem is just the fact that the aggregate funding ratio itself is well below 100%. It's below 80%. So anything below 80% is bad, and certainly something below 78% or below 80% is very negative. So again, the liabilities of the pension fund are greater than the assets they have to pay. So they just basically they couldn't pay out everything, even if they went starting right now. So they wouldn't be able to pay everything out. On the next slide, we see the 12-year defined pension funding negative trend, which is even more disturbing than what we just talked about. In this chart, if you look at this chart, what you'll see is that the green line in the middle, the bar part, is the assets that are in aggregate for the defined benefit pension plans of all of the S&P 500 companies combined. The liabilities is the orange line there, and you can see that those are greater than the assets, and even worse, the spread between the bar and the orange line is getting greater and greater, which causes that pink line on the bottom to get even further down and further down into the negative. Because I do work with a lot of U.S. Airways employees, and I know we have some U.S. Airways employees on the call as well. U.S. Airways employees are intimately familiar with this idea of the pension underfunding, as the second bankruptcy court judge in 2004, I believe it was, actually hit his gavel, and the pension for all of the pilots and flight attendants and other folks that have contracts with the company were just wiped out and were then sent over to the PBGC, which is one of the things I want to talk about in a minute. But as we move to the next slide, if we look at the causes of the underfunding, back in the 80s, we remember everything was just roaring. It was going great guns. The stock market was never going to drop, et cetera, et cetera. The economy was robust, and to avoid losing the tax-exempt status, the employers had higher benefit levels. Unfortunately, when the economy started going the other way, they didn't reduce those benefits in their negotiations with their employees, and then, in fact, continued to increase those benefits to an unsustainable level. When you combine that with the two major stock market reversals we had, the dot-com boom bust in the early 2000s, and then the 2008 and 9 crash of the stock market, those two items together came to cause the crisis that we're in now with defined benefit plans. During the 80s, backtracking for just a second, during the 80s, corporate was able to reduce the amount that they paid in because they were using assumptions sometimes of 12, 14% annual growth rates ad infinitum, and those were just totally unsustainable. But the actuaries were using those numbers, and consequently the companies were able to fund with a lot less dollar value than they would otherwise. So that also contributed to the problem. As we think about those three things, the benefit levels being really too high when the economy was robust, the two stock market reversals we had, and then the lower corporate funding that was allowed in the 80s, et cetera, we find some scary numbers, and we look at that next when we look at the PBGC, or the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. 300 companies in the Standard & Poor's 500 index have pension plans, and by pension plans today we're talking strictly about defined benefit. And I should have probably defined defined benefit earlier. Defined benefit plan is a plan that says if you stay with us 30 years and you retire at the age of 65, we'll pay you $3,000 a month based on your previous salaries. And I have an example of that in another slide or two that I'll get to in a minute. But so that's a defined benefit plan. In other words, they set out in their document what your benefit will be based on calculations of your final average earnings, your years of service, and your age. A defined contribution plan, on the other hand, says we will put into an account with your name on it that it has, take for a number, 10% of your gross earnings, we will put in that account for you every month. The good thing about defined contribution plans are that those accounts are in your name, and whatever that balance is when you retire is your money. The downside to that is the same thing. That's your pension plan, and you're not looking to the company to provide any more for you or any additional. Whatever you have at the end of that retirement, or excuse me, at the end of your working years going into retirement, is the amount of money you're going to have to retire on. So that's the basic definition between the two. Getting back to the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the PBGC, 94% of those 308 companies that have defined benefit plans are underfunded. Now, again, what that means is that those pension plans today could not pay all of the benefits that are due to the employees. So you would not get your benefit that you were expecting at retirement. The government is projecting that as many as 150 private pension plans are underfunded to the point that they face insolvency. Insolvency, of course, being just a hair's distance away from bankruptcy. Insolvency meaning that you just would not be able, no matter what happens, you wouldn't be able to pay all of your liabilities, or in this case, you wouldn't be able to pay all of the pension benefits that were due to the employees. So 150 of these 308 are considered to be insolvent or facing insolvency. Meanwhile, the PBGC, which again is an independent government agency that takes over these private pension plans that become insolvent, isn't healthy itself either. So as we look at the next slide, we can see that, as I say here, the government is too broke to step in, and they really are. As of 2011, the PBGC already has a deficit of $34 billion, and that $34 billion is even higher now, although they have not released the 2012 numbers yet. They're having a deficit of $34 billion. So the PBGC itself indicates that they have a 91% chance of becoming insolvent itself by the year 2032. Now, some of us aren't worried about the year 2032 because of our current age, and it's like, I'm never going to make it that far. Well, that's not necessarily true by any means. Let's just say that you're 50 right now, and you're looking at 2032. You'll be 69 years old then, and I think there's a very good chance that you're looking at still being around. 2032 is only 19 years away, so I would say unless you're up in your late 70s or early 80s, you're probably going to be around in 2032. And I sure would not want to bet against the House when they've got a 91% chance, and in this case, the House being a bad thing, because those plans, the PBGC itself becoming insolvent. To top that off, the PBGC also estimates that pension insolvencies could double over the next decade, forcing it to take on as much as $295 billion in underfunded pension plan liabilities. That's an additional $295 billion of planned liabilities that are already underfunded. Again, as I mentioned, the PBGC is a quasi-government agency and therefore looks to the federal government for any deficit funding. Certainly everyone on this call is well aware that we now have over $16 trillion of debt, annual budget deficits running into the neighborhood of $1 trillion. Congress has made no indication at all that they desire to spend hundreds of billions of dollars more to bail out these private underfunded pension plans. There is a provision of ERISA, which is the Employee Retirement Security Act of 1974, that is being debated now. First of all, the ERISA expires in 2014, and consequently something will need to be done there, or some of the provisions certainly do. So the unions and some of the employers have gone to Congress with their own plans of what they like to do and what they want to do. And it's possible, and I want to say possible, that the U.S. could even eliminate the PBGC entirely. Now, for those of you that are old enough to remember the FSLIC, you may remember that that was also a quasi-government agency, and before it went away, people thought, oh, well, savings and loan institutions are great, backed by the federal government. We've got nothing to worry about. The FSLIC will take care of us. Again, those of you that are old enough to remember, you woke up one morning and the government said, oh, the FSLIC doesn't exist anymore. And those of you with money in savings and loans banks just lost the great majority of your money. So we can't count on the fact of the government bailing out these pension plans either. And in fact, like I said, I wouldn't be too surprised if they even eliminate the PBGC entirely. On the next slide, I've got a proposal of pension cuts. And this one is really, in my opinion, is very, very serious and could cause some extreme problems for folks. Currently, there is a proposal in the Senate, in one of the committees, that would allow these struggling plans to cut benefits to 110% of what the PBGC would pay. Now, what does that mean? Okay, that means that you retired 5 years ago. You're currently receiving a pension from your employer. And I have an example here. Let's look at a Teamsters truck driver, Greg Smith, 64 years old. He's already retired 2 years ago after 31 years with his company. Currently, he's getting a pension of $3,019 a month from an underfunded pension plan. This plan is expected to go insolvent by the year 2024. If the PBGC were to take over that plan, they would then pay anyone retiring after they took over a monthly amount of about $1,100. And again, I will tell you quickly about the U.S. Airways, since I'm most familiar with that one, plan that has been terminated through bankruptcy. The pilots plan in specific had provision for the pilots to maintain a certain amount of benefit over their lifetime. When the bankruptcy court declared it insolvent and turned it over to the PBGC, the benefit for the employees that were already retired were able to sustain what they had for a while, and I'll get to that in a second. But the new retirees would receive a mere pittance of what they should have been getting. I mean, to the extent of 20% of what they should have gotten in their retirement plan. And that's what we're talking about here. Again, going back to the example, the PBGC would pay a new retiree $1,100 a month that was in the same shoes as our fictional Greg Smith here. But what this new proposal would allow would actually be to allow the PBGC to go back and say, okay, Greg Smith, you've been getting $3,019 a month. You've been getting that for 2 years, and you, at that time, fully expected that you would get that benefit for the rest of your life. But guess what? We're going to change that. Starting next month, you're only going to get $1,210 a month. That's a 60% reduction in what he was already getting, had expected he would get for the rest of his life. He's 65 years old, retired 31 years with the company, and now they're going to turn around and reduce his pension by 60%. As we move to the next slide, we look at the 3 consequences, and there are certainly more, but I came up with 3 consequences of this situation that I believe should trouble anyone that has a defined benefit plan. And if your defined benefit plan currently has more, is overfunded by, 10% or whatever, it's 110% funded, that doesn't let you out of the woods on this, because sure as the sun comes up in the morning, we will have a market correction from these lofty levels, and yours could easily be underfunded depending upon how the funds have been invested on your behalf. So what we see here is, again, 3 consequences of this situation. First is what benefit level or what level of pay you're receiving or going to receive may be cut Again, our example was 60% with the Teamsters. I would say that the U.S. Airways pilots was at least 60%, probably a little bit more than that. And again, Greg Smith, our example, retired in the year 2011 with fully expecting to get this $3,000 a month, and with his Social Security benefits, etc., I'm sure he would have worked his budget to where he would be able to live on that amount of money. However, he wasn't expecting that 2 years later someone was going to come back and say, well, we're going to reduce that $3,000 down to $1,200. And now he's got to make some serious budget cuts and, in fact, could potentially not be able to make a mortgage or other items. Maybe can't even pay for his medical now. So that's certainly one that is an issue, just the idea that the benefit may be cut. And again, if the second point, if your lifestyle is tied closely to that pay level, you may need to change it quickly and dramatically lower your standard of living. Again, the example of Greg Smith comes into play, and quite honestly, he probably would not be told of that decrease in his pension benefit more than a month or so ahead. So dramatic cut, and also almost instantaneously. So the third consequence is that you may want to change right now, and I do mean today, how your other investments and portfolios are structured. You may want to be more aggressive to compensate for this potential future pension cuts. You may need to put more money away. If you're still in your earning years, you may need to start funding other vehicles, investment vehicles that are available to you to a greater extent as well. What we would like to offer you today for being on this conference call is a chance to have your portfolio reviewed and analyzed for you and give you our best thoughts on where you are and where you're heading, and if there is a likelihood that you will be able to meet your goals and objectives. What we do, a lot of advisors will only look at the money that they have invested, that the client has invested with them and that they're getting quote-unquote paid on. What we do is we really want to take an entire look at your portfolio. So if you were to come in and talk to us and take advantage of our willingness to sit with you at no cost or obligation to you and go through your entire investment portfolio, we'd want to see everything. We'd want to look at your 401k. We'd want to look at the benefits that were calculated for your pension, look at any IRAs or joint accounts, any other investments that you might have, in order to look at that, compare your investment goals right now with how you are invested, look at your overall allocation to see that your allocation is also suitable for what you're trying to do. We see clients quite often that come in and are told that they have a diversified portfolio, that they have an asset allocation, but what we find out is that the asset allocation for their IRA, let's say, does not match up with their allocation that they did in their 401k plan, because the advisor that they're using or themselves may not have actually taken into account the idea of the extra account. So again, we would want to offer you the ability to come in and have us review your portfolio and analyze it for you. We'll take all of your investments and pull them all together and take a look at that, see how you're invested. After we do that, we'll be able to give you a better idea if your investments match your goals and how well they're matching your goals, or if they're not matching them at all. And then also we can give you suggestions on what to change or adjust if it doesn't appear that your investment is lining up with your goals. That's it for what I had for prepared information. So Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you, and I imagine Jeff will say this, but if you do have any questions, you can feel free to email me, and Jeff will give you that information. So Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, great, Ed. It looks like we're on the next slide, and I guess the best way if somebody wants to start on a review or analysis is to do what? Give you a call there at the office or send you an email?
Yes.
And the best number, it looks like, is area code 704-552-8689.
Call me on that number, and I'll be happy to set something up. You can ask for Sarah Beth. She doesn't like it when I set my own appointments. I tend to mess them up. So I can analyze portfolios, and I work with people with portfolios, but I can't run my own calendar. So ask for Sarah Beth McCarter. She'll be happy to set something up for you that's convenient for you. Certainly we can do it in the evenings as well as on the weekend if need be, so we're happy to do that. You can also just drop an email directly to me, which is ednewton@newtoninvestments.com, or you can send one directly to Sarah Beth, which is Sarah Beth, and it's SARABETH @newtoninvestments.com.
Great. Ed, this is great information. Thanks for being on the call today. We want to thank everybody else for participating, whether you're live or listening to the replay. We'll let you know when the next seminar is, and we want to thank everybody again for being on the call. Ed, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, and thanks, everyone, for being on.